Oi. Oh, wait. Now I remember where I was trying to go. It's the right place to go. Right thing to do. Oi. Gotta make sure we here for a while, not too long. Kind of want to get this off, especially because we only got one more preseason game. Definitely been some interesting things so far, if I do say so myself. But not too much to talk about just yet. Oh, I love live streams. You gotta do a lot of setup. Just post hand. But this would be a good week for the Ravens, though. Oh no! That's not what I was trying to do. It's all good. Alright. I think I'm pretty much about set. Hopefully. And we'll get started with our little talk here. One last thing. One last thing. Alright, I think we are good to go. What's going on, everybody? Hope you guys are enjoying your night because it is almost 11 p.m. Look at me recording this late at, well, not even recording, but live streaming this late at night. Should have done this hours ago. But I did want to give some of my thoughts about the Ravens' second preseason game and kind of talk about some of the ups and downs with the team that we've seen so far. Obviously, we got about, a little over 2 weeks before the season starts, and obviously we all know we are starting off in Kansas City to open up the season. So it's good to talk about some of these the positives, the negatives, the ups and downs, some of the things we've seen so much, because it definitely has to be discussed for the most part. But there's a couple things that need to be talked about. What's going on to everybody in the chat? Excuse this background. I'm legitimately doing something a little bit new. I finally got a green screen. I think you guys can tell this is not my normal background. Y'all know normally you would just see what's behind me, but I got a green screen now, so I'm kind of working that aspect. So I got this. I can pretty much change up whatever background I want, and I kind of have an idea for the backgrounds I'm going to be using. Like for the Ravens and Chiefs game, I already know which background I'm going to be rocking for the game, so that's kind of just the overall aspect. And it's pretty much my first day using this green screen, so I'm trying to get the hang of it, but I don't even know if I'm going to get a full hang of it. But yeah, we kind of got this background here. It's kind of going to be what we're going to use for pretty much any time I am streaming. I kind of just see how that goes. I might try to use it for some videos, but I got to be at least a little bit more consistent with how it's utilized. So I got things to learn about this green screen, but it works so much. Obviously, this is the regular screen you're going to be seeing. If there is any time I want to play some gameplay, obviously I can be right here with it for the most part in terms of playing any game. And if I wanted to, oh, thanks, that's perfect. You know, it's not like I didn't have this set up beforehand. You know, it's interesting when you set up something beforehand and then all of a sudden just disappears. Like I didn't have this set up beforehand because I was going to talk about this game. Thanks. Appreciate that, stream. Appreciate that. Anyway, yeah, green screens. Trying to figure this out. It's I got time before the season starts, so hopefully I get the hang of it. But this is kind of just what we're going to be doing moving forward. Anyway, you didn't come to see me talk about green screens and working that aspect into my videos and my live streams. I'm here to talk about the 2024 Ravens. so far in terms of the ups and downs. Now, of course, we're not really speaking on the starters for the most part. We might do a brief overall aspect and recap of what's happened in training camp, some of the positives, some of the negatives, who has improved their stocks to try to make the team, and who's literally ruined their stocks and most likely will get cut. We'll probably do something about that, not next week, but the week afterwards, because next week is the final week of the preseason. So afterwards, they're going to have to eventually cut their roster down, and we'll probably speak about that just before they officially do that. But yeah, I wanted to talk about some of the ups and downs with the Ravens so far through 2 preseason games, because I think we've seen a good chunk of game time or gameplay action to make an assessment of what we can see in terms of some of the positives and some of the negatives. So let's kind of get into that overall aspect. Let's start off with the positives, because it's always good to start off on a positive aspect. 2 people I can definitely name, no question. Nate Wiggins and Trenton Simpson. Nate Wiggins showed us everything we needed to see from him in that first preseason game. He's ready. Okay? No need to risk him. I know the Ravens are going to be smart with this. Or at least I hope they're smart with this. He don't need to play until week 1. The same needs to be said about Trenton Simpson. He's ready. He's shown the capabilities. He's shown the talent. He's flashed the ability. Obviously, he still has some work to do, because there's times where he'll miss the gaps, but he's been on it. He's normally been on it in terms of where he has to be on the field, both with the run game in terms of stopping the run. So on the aspect of the run defense, where he has to be in the gaps, Simpson's been doing a good job with that to an extent. There's times where he's missing an assignment or missing the gaps in terms of where he needs to be, but he's been relatively consistent with that, so I do like what I'm seeing from there. And then in terms of pass coverage, we actually got to see him in pass coverage, and he did surprisingly well. He did really well in pass coverage. I like what I'm seeing from Simpson. Right now, everything is pointing upward for him, and I personally feel he doesn't necessarily need to play in the final preseason game. Chances are he's going to get some reps, because I don't think we have a lot of linebackers that are healthy right now. So there's a good chance he's probably going to get some reps in that final preseason game against the Packers. But everything we've seen from Simpson, what we've heard from training camp, some of the footage we've seen from training camp, and now some of the things we've seen from Simpson in the preseason game, I think it's safe to say he's ready to showcase that. He's ready for week 1. He's ready to do what he needs to do as a starter. Now, I'm not going to put a lot of pressure on Simpson and say he's got to be able to deliver at a high level immediately, because he's got Roquan Smith next to him, and that's going to help him out. That's all the help he's going to need. So I'm not going to expect him to play at that high level immediately, but as the season goes on, especially with Roquan Smith being next to you, we're going to start to see him get more and more comfortable, and we're going to start to see him do exactly what he needs to do. But yeah, I like what I've seen from Nate Wiggins. I like what I've seen from Trenton Simpson. I just like a lot of that. So I'm not too concerned with those 2. Other than those guys, in terms of individual players, because we'll go into each aspect. In terms of those 2, other than that, Owen Wright, he's been awesome. I think he's been great through the 2 games. He's been utilized a lot, both in the run game as well as special teams. So he's fighting for a spot here in the running back room, and I think he's got a good shot for it. You know, Keaton Mitchell's not going to be back for some time, and obviously they're going to be utilizing Justice Hill there. It doesn't hurt for them to have a third back that they can trust in, and Wright's been doing a great job throughout training camp and throughout these preseason games to give himself a good case. He was fantastic in the first game. He was pretty solid in this game too. So I feel like he's doing a good enough job to try to help himself. Other than that, we also got to look at 2 guys who they've done a good job, and I feel like they've probably got a good shot to make the roster as well. Tylan Wallace, both Wallace and Kirkwood, I'm not just going to say Wallace himself, both Wallace and Kirkwood, they've done a good job. Or Kirkland, sorry. They've done a good job. Like, as receivers. It's not like we're seeing a lot with the passing game, because we're not seeing a lot with the passing game, given the fact that we've got some aspects here with the passing game in terms of the backup quarterbacks, which we'll get into. But yeah, Kirkwood and Wallace, they've been doing a good job. When the passes have been given to them, they've been getting open, they've been getting separation, and they've been making some tough catches. Through the 2 games, both Kirkwood and Wallace have made some really nice catches. Obviously, the wide receiver depth is something that is still very questionable, and just the entire wide receiver room in general, not even just the depth, just the wide receiver room in general has been very questionable. But it's good to see that both Kirkwood and Wallace are doing well. And then another name who really showed up in this second game against the Falcons, man, Dayton Wade. Dayton Wade, man, he really showed up big, and I think he's making a push as well to get on the roster. That touchdown that he had, that double move he pulled to get open, that's going to give him a good shot. The receiving competition isn't really tough. I'm going to be honest. The receiving competition is not tough. It's not tough at all. Anybody that can prove they can get open, get separation, and catch the football has a great shot to be on this team. So he's definitely in the positive. You got 3 receivers so far through the preseason that have shown you some level of positivity, considering the fact that they got certain individuals throwing them the football. So you got to like some of the things you're seeing there for the most part. But yeah, I really do like some of the things I'm seeing from our from these receivers that are fighting for a roster spot. Obviously, they're not going to be, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. But some of these guys are fighting for like that wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 spot. Maybe even wide receiver 3, depending on how things look. So it's nice to see some positive aspects from Wallace, from Kirkwood, and then we saw Wade in this last game. What's going on, Houston, man? Appreciate you stopping by. Your Texans been looking great, man. They've been looking great. They're going to have a big year. But, yeah, I like some of the things I've seen there. And, of course, I think it's safe to say Rosengarten has just been solid. He's getting that spot for the most part. He's been very solid. He's been great for the most part. I really like what I've seen from Rosengarten. He's been doing his job. So, him coming in as a rookie and him performing well early on in the preseason, that's great. I still think he should play in that 3rd game. I think our offensive line needs all the possible reps they can give to their offensive linemen, because these guys need to be ready for week 1. You're going up against Kansas City. You've got to be prepared. So Rosengarten, he's looked great so far through 2 preseason games. He's been stout. He's been consistent. You got to love what you're seeing from him. Guy is looking great straight off the bat. And I hope he keeps this up. We'll see what he does against the Packers. Andrew Voorhees took a little bit of a dip in this game. He was still overall consistent, but man, he gave up a bad rep. It was a bad rep. He did not block well. The defender just trucked this dude out the way and then went to sack Josh Johnson on a 3rd down play. That was a very bad rep for Voorhees. Overall, throughout the game, he was consistent. He was solid, but he still got a little bit of work on his technique. Because that aspect, man, it wasn't just him giving up a bad rep. He got bulldozed. He got completely beat. But other than that, he's been relatively solid. And yeah, when I look at the positives for the most part, there's players, that are trying to fight for a roster spot that's made plays here and there. But there isn't too much aspects to really look at. The Ravens haven't put a lot of, positive aspects that you can look at on film. And that's because they haven't played a lot of the starters. Oh, wait. Can't believe I almost forgot him. Because we hadn't seen much of him until this game. I gotta give credit. David Ojabo looked nice against the Falcons. He looked nice. He looked fast. He looked physical. Everything that we expected to see him showcase from a talent perspective, he showcased it in this game. There were some concerns due to the injuries that he dealt with to start his career. There were some concerns that we weren't going to see that burst of speed and physicality from him. He showed that. He absolutely showed that in this game against the Falcons. Now, will he be able to put it all together? We'll have to see come regular season. But to see him finally get on the field and play in the game, and to see him still look that quick, still have that burst of speed and athleticism coming off the edge, to see that from him after the injuries he's had, that's a good sign. So I think David Ojabo did a great job in this game to showcase he's still got that capability. He just has to put it together and be consistent enough to be able to get to the quarterback. We need big years out of David Ojabo and Odafe Owe, because you look at the pass rushing unit, and it's not going to be it's not going to be, the strongest based on predictions. Losing Jadeveon Clowney does hurt. But you didn't lose anyone else beside that. You still kept Van Noy. You made sure to re-sign Matabike. You still got Jones here. You still got a lot of the guys back. It's just Clowney was that damn effective. So you've got to find a way to replace that production. And the way the Ravens are looking to replace that production is by relying on Ojabo and Odafe Owe. It comes down to those two. David Ojabo and Odafe Owe have to have great years this year in order to make up for the loss of Clowney. So it's nice to see David Ojabo get out there, play well, and look well during that time. So that's a major positive for him. Other than that, not much to really look at. A lot of these guys that are out there are really going to be, guys that are either not going to make the roster or be on the practice squad. So there's not much to make of it. So, yeah, I think when we look at, Rosengarten, Voorhees, David Ojabo, Trent Simpson, Nate Wiggins, Wallace, Kirkwood, Wade, definitely after this last game, Wright. I think these are some of the names you can look at. And then if you take it from each aspect, the secondary for the most parts looked nice. It's nice to see that we do have depth in our secondary. This is probably the most amount of depth we're going to have in our secondary in probably forever. And just the secondary is doing a great job. The linebacking unit, Trenton Simpson's been a monster out there. He's been doing a great job, and they've been fundamentally sound. Malik Harrison, he's played some, and he's looked nice in what he's done. The front seven, there's still some concerns there with the run defense, which we'll talk about when we get to the negative. And offensively, receivers, some guys have made plays. Other guys we haven't seen anything from, which we'll get to in the negatives. Running game wasn't as stout in this second preseason game as it was in the first. Offensive line, it's been some ups and downs. And then the quarterback situation, that has to be discussed here because that's definitely a mixed bag. So I think we've seen the positives. We've named some of the players and some of the things we have seen. It's been great. Let's move on to the negative aspects here because there has been some negatives that we have seen from these preseason games so far, or these two preseason games. It's not like it's multiple, just these two preseason games, as well as some of the things I guess we've heard from training camp as well. I get a new background. Oh, no, I'm using a green screen now. I have a green screen. I have an actual green screen. I just spent like 3 minutes talking about it at the beginning of the live stream. I have a green screen now, so I can pretty much interchange whatever background I want. It pretty much helps me because like I needed a green screen for quite some time. I could use like this if I wanted to do any sort of recording for any games like that. Yeah, green screen. So it's just a green screen. I needed that for a while now. I've been trying to get a green screen because, usually you would just see my regular background of how this room looks. But I wanted to get a green screen because whenever I do a live stream, I kind of want to have a specific background for each specific game. Like I already know what background I'm going to use for Kansas City. I do have an interesting wallpaper I saw online that I'm going to use as the background for that. So can't wait to see how that's going to look. Hopefully it works out because I'm trying to work all the kinks out. It's my first time using the green screen. I'm trying to see it. As you can see, my hands are like this. I'm trying to figure this whole thing out. Anyway, talked about the positives. Let's get into some of these negatives for the Ravens. Man. Okay, so I think the number one thing we all have to look at is the backup quarterback position in terms of how that's looked. Now, I do have some positives to say about some of the things we kind of saw. Josh Johnson actually had a perfect game. He did not have a single incompletion. It didn't feel like it, but he didn't have a single incompletion. He was like 11 for 11 for like 120 or something like that. So he was 11 for 11, one something, and then he had a touchdown pass. So he was very, very decisive with the ball. He was accurate with the ball. And he made the right throws he needed to make. And, he got the team down the field to score a touchdown. That was a much better performance for him as compared to week 1 where he was 4 of 12 and he just couldn't move the ball at all. So that was a good aspect to see from him. Now, Devin Leary, In the first game, he had some positives there. He led them down the field for a touchdown drive. This time around, in this game against the Falcons, he was ineffective. He was ineffective. He was so ineffective that they brought in that third guy in Emory Jones, who we all remember because of what happened in the Eagles game. They actually gave him time to play, and Emory Jones looked decent. He looked pretty nice. He's definitely got a little bit of speed, so he has the capability of taking off. He looked nice, and he made a great throw on that, 52-yard or 56-yard touchdown pass to Wade. So that was a great play from him. I like some of the things we saw from him. I think overall our backups in the first game, Wade looked nice. Jones didn't even have a chance. He got thrown into a terrible situation, and Josh Johnson looked awful. In the second game, Johnson looked much better. Emory Jones got a chance to showcase what he could do, and Leary didn't really have much to do. Overall, I think it's been relatively decent in terms of preseason performance. In terms of training camp, I mean, these backup quarterbacks have been getting cooked. Josh Johnson's been getting cooked by our defense. Larry, he's made plays here and there, but he's been getting beat by our defense. Emory Jones, if he's been out there doing some things, I haven't heard much of him doing anything out there. These backups haven't exactly looked the best. Through 2 preseason games, we've seen some good and some bad from them. The good for Leary was game 1. Game 2 was bad. For both Jones and Johnson, bad was game 1. Good was for game 2. So it's a nice mix to see from them because we've seen the good with the bad. But overall, when I just look at this backup quarterback unit, I don't fully trust in what I'm seeing here. The argument could be made based on this. Josh Johnson still looks to be the overall best. And if that ends up being the case, I don't feel comfortable about the backup quarterback position. If Lamar has got to miss time for any reason, this team is not going to last because I don't really look at any of our backup quarterbacks and say, oh yeah, they could just come in, hold it down, they'll be effective, and get it done. If you look at our schedule this year, you can't really afford that. Can you imagine this dude having to come in and play against the Chiefs or the Eagles or the Bills? What is he going to do against them? What is Johnson going to do? What is Leary going to do? What is Jones going to do? If they got to come in just for a few drives, let's say Lamar got to go get checked out real quick, and someone needs to come in for a few drives late in the game. You trust any of these guys? I don't fully I don't even want to be too down on them because I did see some progress from some of them and some good, but I don't fully trust these guys. I think it's fair to say. I think many of us feel that exact same way. We don't fully trust what we're seeing from the backup quarterback position, and that could be an issue for the most part. So it's possible the Ravens could go look for a backup quarterback, but knowing the Ravens, they may still sit back and say, we like some of the things we're seeing from these guys, and they might keep them. There's a good chance Josh Johnson is the backup quarterback this year. I've seen fans say we got to go out and get somebody. People have thrown the name of Ryan Tannehill around and saying if Tannehill's around, go get him as a backup, which again, I wouldn't have a problem if Tannehill ends up becoming a backup quarterback, but I just don't see that happening. I just don't feel comfortable with the quarterback situation in Baltimore right now because if Lamar has to miss time for any reason, that is an actual concern to me because none of these guys can come in and fill in and be highly effective against some of the teams we got to play. Matter of fact, let me pull up the schedule here just to see, at any point. Just looking at the Ravens' schedule. Just looking at them. Week 1 against Kansas City. Week 2 against the Raiders. Week 3 against the Cowboys. Bills Week 4. Bengals Week 5. Commanders Week 6. Bucks Week 7. Bucks, Browns, Broncos, Bengals, Steelers, Chargers, Eagles, Giants, Steelers, Texans, Ravens. There's a good chunk of games that I look at here, and I'm just yeah, you put a backup quarterback in. Either one of these guys comes in for one of these games, I can't see them doing anything. What am I supposed to expect from Josh Johnson going up against the Eagles defense? What should I expect from him going up against the Texans defense, the Steelers defense, the Browns defense? the Bills defense, the Chiefs defense. Like I don't fully trust what I'm seeing from the backup quarterback position. So that does leave a level of concern, and we'll see what the Ravens are gonna choose to do, in regards to that. Hopefully we do see something, but I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe they go look for somebody. Maybe they stick with the guys they have. But that would probably be my main concern. Other than that, we got to get back to the offensive line. Faalele was actually a little bit better in this. I think he was more consistent. He didn't do anything major that would make you sit back and say, "Oh man, he's bad." We saw the good today. We saw some of the bad last week against the Eagles. So that's kind of a concern there. What's going on, Sam? That's kind of a concern there. So for Faalele, there's been some good, there's been some bad. I still don't know if I feel fully comfortable with him being a starter in the offensive line. I'd probably lean towards no, but I'm willing to give him a chance. Let's see what he does against the Packers. Somebody's going to have to take that spot. But I think Faalele did himself a huge favor by being a lot more consistent in this game. Somebody that didn't do themselves a favor, oh God, Ben Cleveland. Ben Cleveland, I don't even know why they're playing him at center. I guess they're looking to potentially try and maybe have him be a potential backup center if anything was to happen to Linderbaum. Or if Linderbaum's not ready to go for week 1, which they said they don't expect that, but injuries can be tricky. You never know how that's going to go. If Linderbaum's not ready for week 1, somebody's going to have to take that role, which is why they've been playing Ben Cleveland in that center spot. Oh boy, did he have a bad ride. Oh my God. I don't know why he snapped the ball. It was a play. Josh Johnson was trying to get everybody set. He was trying to motion somebody to the right and trying to get everybody set. And for some reason, Ben Cleveland just decided, boom, I'm going to snap the ball. And he snaps the ball, and then it's just like, why? Ben Cleveland did not do himself any favors by how he performs in this game. There's just times where he just wasn't consistent. He was getting beat in some cases. And that rep where he just snapped the ball before it was ready really made him look bad. So I think it was a negative aspect for him there. The offensive line overall in this game was still solid because, you got that one bad moment from Voorhees, that one bad moment from Cleveland, maybe a small miniature moment from Faalele. But other than that, I think the offensive line wasn't the worst in this game, but it is still a work in progress, and we're not going to know how it's going to look in totality until week 1. I still think Voorhees and Rosengarten are going to be starters, but it's going to come down to Cleveland or Faalele for that final offensive line spot, because we already know Linderbaum, if he's ready for week 1, we're all good there, and obviously, Ronnie Stanley, we'll be watching him throughout the season to see how that goes, because if he can't perform, yeah, it's truly over. They will have to draft a left tackle and replace him. I don't care what anyone says. So yeah, the offensive line wasn't the worst. A negative in this game would probably be the running game. I think the Falcons actually did a really good job stopping our running game. We did not rush for 100 yards in this game. It was actually relatively tough to run the ball on the Falcons defense, which again, that defense has a lot of talent, so it does make sense. But, with a team like the Ravens, we expect the running game to be a bit more stout. But, that kind of just sticks out how we look at it. But overall, I still think, there was some good runs here and there. But I just don't know. I just don't know about the depth we have in terms of the running back room. It really seems like Justice Hill is going to be utilized a lot alongside Derrick Henry. And they're not going to give Derrick Henry all the carries. Baltimore never operates like that. So they're going to be using multiple backs. So Justice Hill is probably going to be utilized. And until Keaton Mitchell gets back, somebody's going to have to take that role. And we'll just have to see how it goes. The offensive line does play a role in opening up gaps for the running backs to run. So, the offensive line's got to be better in some cases. And the running backs got to be able to produce a little bit more. But overall, I don't think it was the worst thing in the world. It just wasn't the most prominent aspect of this game. They ran the ball better against the Eagles in week 1 of the preseason. Just this time against the Falcons, they didn't do the best. It is what it is, though. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but it is what it is. Looking for another negative. Oh, yeah. This goes for both training camp and the preseason, which we've seen basically nothing. We'll have to see how this is going to work in the regular season. But dog, we've seen absolutely nothing. We've seen nothing in the preseason. We've seen minimal aspects. Maybe one or two plays that we actually have seen from him. Devontae Walker. Now, I will say this. He is dealing with a rib injury. They made it very clear he is injured, so it's not like he has the opportunity to really practice much or really play out there because he's dealing with a rib injury. But prior to the rib injury, we hadn't seen much from Walker in practices. There's been tons of fans consistently asking, what about Walker? What about Walker? What about Walker? I've been seeing Wallace make plays. I've been seeing Kirkwood make plays. I have not been seeing anything involving even Wade. Wade's been making plays in practice, and now all three of those guys I just mentioned, Kirkwood, Wade, Wallace, all of them have been making plays in practice, and they made plays in the preseason. So we're at least seeing something from those receivers that are fighting for those spots. We have not been seeing anything from Walker. Haven't been hearing much from him in practice, and due to this injury, we've seen nothing from him in the preseason, which does leave a level of concern for some fans, because with our history with receivers, the fact that he's hurt already, that's a problem. And the fact that he's not really doing anything, that's also a problem. It's not his fault, but that definitely does bring a concern, and it has to be mentioned. That's one of the downs. The injury to him is unfortunate, and prior to the injury, he wasn't producing much, and now he's got this injury, and now he's not really doing much. Now, he was out there. He was out there in special teams, and he was actually out there for, I think, a few offensive plays. I don't know how many, but he was out there for a few offensive plays. The ball never came his way. I just don't know what to specifically say or think about Walker because I have nothing to go off of. I've got nothing to go off of in terms of what he's done so far. There was one good play from him, I believe, in one of their training camp practices, the way he had a long touchdown. So that was good to see. At least we saw something there. But other than that, in most of these practices, I'm hearing nothing. I'm hearing nothing about Walker. I'm hearing plays from Wallace. I'm hearing plays from Kirkwood. I'm hearing plays from Wade. I'm hearing nothing from Walker. That definitely does bring a concern because the Ravens, whenever it comes to receivers, it can be problematic when we're not seeing anything from them. So I definitely have to look at that aspect and say it's a negative for the most part. Also, another negative that I think I can at least name for the most part, because I don't know how much I've seen from him. I don't even know. You know what? I'm gonna say there's an up and down with this. There's a negative and a positive. I ain't gonna lie, man. I know they moved him to receiver, but I don't know what. I haven't seen much from Malik Cunningham. I think we saw a lot more from him in this second game with the Falcons because we saw nothing. We saw nothing. We saw absolutely nothing from him in the first game against the Eagles, but we at least saw a little bit more from him with the Falcons. I don't know how he would rank in terms of, where he would be positioned against Wallace, against Kirkwood, and against Wade, because those guys have been making a much bigger impact both in practice and in these preseason games than Malik Cunningham. They said they like him. They said they like what they're seeing from him. That's why they moved him to the receiver position, and they feel like he's definitely a good fit and somebody they're trying to get on this team. But I haven't seen a lot from him, so that definitely brings up a level of concern for the most part. But again, I don't know. He's got one more preseason game to try to do something out there. Again, you're working with the quarterbacks you're working with. It's not like you're going to get a lot of opportunities, but it is what it is at the end of the day. You kind of got to see something from him. This receiving room competition is wide open. Anybody can take it. You just got to make plays. And right now, there's 3 other guys that have made plays for you. And you already know you got 3 spots that have already been taken. You know it's going to be Flowers. You know it's going to be Bateman. You know it's going to be Aguilar. There's 2 of the 3 spots that's still open. And right now, there's 3 guys ahead of Malik Cunningham. So I don't know where he fits in that aspect. I have to see something from him in this final preseason game. We saw something here against the Falcons. I got to see more because I'm not liking everything that I'm seeing because I got to see something, man. We got to see something. That's just my case. Defensively, run defense is still a bit of an issue. I don't expect that to be, a major issue. It may be somewhat of a minor issue because, again, we weren't the best defense at stopping the run last year. We did have issues stopping the run. But I don't think it's going to be a major issue with our starters. However, with some of the guys that were out there, it wasn't the best. And the Falcons came into this game with an emphasis on running the ball effectively. And they found ways to run the ball effectively. We could not really slow them down when it came to that. So that was a bit of a concern. Other than that, I think you look at the defense and say it was relatively solid. Again, they're not giving up a lot of points here in these preseason games. These games have been relatively close, so you got to give credit to the defense. It's just the offense for the most part. They've tried to put up some points, but it hasn't been the best of looks. It is what it is at the end of the day. So when we look at it, the ups and downs, the ups really goes to secondary. It's filled with depth. So the secondary is filled with depth. Linebacking units looking nice. The receiving competition, we've seen something from some of these receivers, so that at least is a good thing. Multiple receivers are showing they're showing they can do something. It's great to see multiple receivers actually doing something, so that's a positive. We've seen some good things from some of our offensive linemen, obviously Rosengarten and Voorhees, so that's been good to see. And yeah, other than that, it's been relatively solid. For the negatives, I would still say the run defense still needs work. The O-line, again, still partially in that because of both Falele and Cleveland. That still kind of needs to be determined in how that's going to go. We don't even know how the offensive line is going to look come week one. The backup quarterback position is still something that's very concerning. It's still something that's very concerning, however you look at it. And then, other than those three, yeah, offensive line, run defense, quarterback situation. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. You can look at it. So there's like positive and negatives all around. I think there's been more positive for the Ravens than negatives, but the negatives, they really do matter. You do have concerns with the front seven in terms of the run defense, in terms of how they've looked. There's some concerns there, but not too many because it wasn't like all the starters were out there. And then with the offensive line, that's a legit concern because the guys that are out there are going to be in the starting lineup for the most part. Like Rosengarten and Voorhees are going to be in the starting lineup, and either Falele or Cleveland's taking that last spot. So with the offensive line, that is somewhat of a concern because we don't know how these guys are going to play. And you got the Chiefs week one, so that's going to be a major test for these guys right off the bat. If they can't hold up, they're going to get smoked. Chris Jones is nothing to play with. It's going to be a battle. And in the backup quarterback position, if Lamar goes down, we don't feel comfortable with any of these guys trying to lead the team. There's just nothing. There's nothing special or nothing major there. So there is somewhat of a concern when it comes to that. Overall, I think the Ravens, in terms of the 2024 Ravens so far, overall, when it comes to our depth, we've seen some areas of depth that look nice, like the secondary. We've seen some areas of depth that could have some usefulness, like the receiving core, in terms of how some of these guys are playing. And then we look at aspects that could be concerning, like the backup quarterback position, potentially the offensive line, and the run defense. Now, with the run defense, the defense as a whole, I don't think I'm really going to have any problems here. I think the defense is going to be relatively fine. So I'm just like pointing out this aspect, but I don't think the defense is going to be anything majorly problematic in any aspect. Even the run defense, I think they'll be relatively solid in that. But the offense definitely does have concerns with the offensive line and the receiving corps because we just don't know how that's going to go. And if Lamar does have any reason he's not playing, if there's any reason he's not playing or there's any reason he has to leave to go get checked out for something and someone has to come in, that's just a huge concern. And at that point, we don't feel comfortable when we look at any of these three quarterbacks and say, yeah, they can come in and do it. We don't feel comfortable saying that. So yeah, other than that, it's not much really to talk about. Like again, these preseason games haven't been anything majorly, majorly impactful. There's nothing that's really been blowing anybody's mind in terms of like, oh, this guy's just showcasing it and getting it done. It's been a relatively quiet preseason for the Ravens in terms of guys trying to make impacts out there. It hasn't been anything major. It's been a lot of low-scoring games, and defense is showing some things that's nice. Offense is occasionally showing some things, and the backup quarterback position is what it is. But at the end of the day, you deal with what you got to deal with. We'll see how this is gonna look. I'm very excited this week, though. I'm very excited this week because we got joint practices. We're going up to Green Bay this week to take on to take on. Wow. Well, we are technically taking them on. And that's not the Stars, but we're going up to Green Bay to have joint practices, and then we'll play the final preseason game. And I'm not gonna hype that up. Like we're gonna take on the It's a preseason game, so we're just going up there for the joint practices. I believe it's gonna be like 2 or 3 joint practices this week. We'll see. I'm very excited to see how that's gonna go because I want to see how this offensive line is gonna hold up against other teams because you're not going to be playing against the Ravens defense. I mean, thankfully, because the Ravens defense has been killing them all training camp. Like, there's been way too many times where you're watching some of these highlights and it's not even Lamar in the pocket because he has to escape. That does not look well. I've seen way too many plays where I'm watching Lamar step out of the pocket. I'm like, that's great and all. We know Lamar can do that, but like, the pocket is like collapsing on a consistent basis. And it's good to see Odafe Oweh, who's been killing it all throughout training camp. It's great to see that, but on the flip side, that means your offensive line is consistently getting beat. And we don't even know if Odafe Oweh is going to perform at that high of a level in the regular season. If he has a Justin Madubuike type season, hey, man, he's just that guy now. But I don't know. Either way, week 1 is going to be a major test for the Ravens in terms of how some of these guys stand for the most part. We'll just have to see how these guys hold up. We'll have to see how the front seven holds up in terms of trying to stop the run, the Chiefs' running game, which isn't something the Chiefs really rely on, but it is an aspect that is there and can be dangerous. But most importantly, we have to see how some of these guys are going to do against trying to get to Patrick Mahomes because trying to bring Patrick Mahomes to the ground is very difficult. Like, he's a difficult quarterback to sack because he just finds ways to escape the pocket and extend the play. And if he has any time, at some point, somebody's going to get open. What is Travis Kelce? What is Rashid Rice? And now he's got Xavier Worthy. So it's going to be very interesting in terms of trying to get this guy down. And it can be very difficult. It can be very, very difficult. So this week 1 matchup is exactly what the Ravens need. It sucks. It sucks that we have to go to Kansas City for this opening game. But I still like us starting off the season with week 1. In fact, I like our schedule. I like our schedule being tough early on. Because, again, this is our schedule. First 5 weeks. Kansas City in week 1. Raiders in week 2. Cowboys in week 3. Bills in week 4. And Bengals in week 5. We have 2 primetime games and a 4 p.m. game all within the first 5 weeks of the season. And you're going up against 4 out of 5. Well, not 4. Well, 3. No, yeah. 3. You're going up against 3 teams that went to playoffs last year and 4 teams that we absolutely know can be dangerous. So you get Mahomes week 1, you get Dak week 3, you get Allen week 4, you get Burrow week 5. So I like the fact that we are dealing with a tough schedule to start the season because it's going to be a test that is absolutely needed. We need to see how this offensive line is gonna fare against some of these teams because Chiefs defense is tough, Cowboys defense is tough, especially when they're at home, and this will be in Dallas. Bills defense is tough. Bengals defense is an underrated defense that we don't really talk about. Raiders defense, we'll have to see. But this is going to be a great test for the Ravens. So I like that their test is happening early on because it's going to prepare them for the end of the season. Because the last 5 games of the season, Eagles, Giants, Steelers, Texans, Browns. If you take off the Giants, assuming they don't make an impact, you're going to have to deal with the Eagles. You're going to have to deal with the Steelers. You're going to have to deal with the Browns. And you're going to have to deal with the Texans. All 4 of these teams have good defenses. And then prior to the Eagles game, that's going to be a primetime game against the Chargers. And if Jim Harbaugh's got that team rolling by then, that's another tough game. So the start of the season, it's a tough schedule. The end of the season, it's a tough schedule. So Baltimore has to be prepared early on. They're getting tested early on. And if they can pass the test early on, they'll be prepared for the second half of the season, which is already difficult for them. It's a very tough schedule for the Ravens this year, and they have to be on it. We can't just assume because the team was balling out last year that they're going to replicate that same success. We also can't assume that the offense is just going to be killing teams just because we got Derrick Henry now. Like, they have to be on point. The offensive line has to be on point. The receivers, other than Zay Flowers, needs to do their jobs because it can't just be Zay Flowers. And yes, we know that duo of Likely and Andrews, which we hope will be able to finally emerge itself and showcase what they can do and actually be able to utilize both to the highest degree. We hope that works out. But at some point, it's not always going to be a situation where you can just rely on those three and assume no one else can do something. Bateman's got to step up. Aguilar's got to at least be consistent. It's someone else that may be out there. Whether it's Wallace, whether it's Kirkwood, whether it's Wade, someone's got to go out there and make some plays. You know? It's not like we can just rely on Lamar to just save us in every aspect of the passing game. And yes, we do have Derrick Henry now. But just because you have a great player does not mean you're going to be able to get it done consistently offensively. They'll look to stop him too, so that becomes a problem. So we got to be better in all facets, especially with this offensive line. Because if this offensive line is not good, Derrick Henry's not going to have any gaps to run through, and Lamar's going to be running for his life all season. That's not a good look. So the offensive line's got to be ready to go week one. The receiving core, somebody else is going to have to step up other than Zay Flowers. And defense for the front seven has to be ready to go, because if they're not ready to go against Mahomes, it's going to be problematic. And yeah, we'll get Keaton Mitchell back. But he's not here to start the season. And I don't think he's going to be here for like the first. He may miss the first half of the season. So you will have to go up against Kansas City. You will have to go up against Buffalo. You will have to go up against Dallas. You will have to go up against Cincinnati. You will have to go up against these type of teams without Keaton Mitchell being there. Second half of the season, it'll be a great 1-2 punch. But the first half, nah, you're not going to have Keaton Mitchell for that. So we do have to be raring to go. You're going to have half the season, potentially. You're going to be going through half the season without Keaton Mitchell. We'll see. Maybe he comes back earlier than that, but I assume he's going to be back during the second half of the year. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say. I'm going to read some of these comments, and then I'm going to head on out of here because I wasn't expecting to be here long. So I'll read some of this. Yeah, definitely that time of year. You know, Ravens football is back. If the Ravens don't go all in at the trade deadline, we will never win a Super Bowl with Lamar. It depends on what they're going to go all in for. I know a lot of people want the Ravens to go all in with the receiver, but I'm going to be honest, with the way we run our offense, I don't think just having another great receiver here is going to automatically solve the problem for the Ravens, especially if the issue is an offensive line issue and it's not a receiver issue. Let's just say by the trade deadline, this actually works out for the Ravens. Because again, I don't think you need to have 3-4 great receivers. You just need 2. You look at the Niners, it's not like they have 3, 4, 5 great receivers. You've got 2 great receivers in Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. We'll see if he's still there. But right now he is, so we have to just count him. You got Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, 2 great receivers, and a great tight end in George Kittle. You look at the Eagles, you got 2 great receivers in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Having 2 great receivers definitely helps out. You don't need 3, you don't need 4, you don't need 5. You just need to have 2 great receivers, or 2 receivers that can be consistent. Zay Flowers is 1. Who's going to be second? Because yes, Andrew's going to be great, likely he's going to be great, but you're not always going to have all 4 of these guys. You're not going to have all 3 of these guys on the field every single play. There'll be times where it may just be Andrews and Zay, or Likely and Zay, or just Andrews and Likely. But, you know, we'll just throw it out just for the sake argument. Let's just say it's Andrew and Zay. If those 2 get covered up, who do you go to? If Andrews is getting covered up in the middle of the field, if they're setting, or maybe even double teamed, and we got some sort of lockdown corner that's actually doing a great job on coverage on Zay, who do you go to? That's the type of conversation you gotta have. So if this works out for them the way they think Bateman's gonna work out, because they have so much trust in Rashad Bateman, they expect him to have a huge year. If that actually comes to fruition and he has a great year alongside Zay Flowers, I don't think there should be any talk about concerns. I'll talk about getting another receiver, because I don't think you'll have concerns if you got 2 guys that are balling out together and it's working well. You get Bateman to come along with Zay alongside Andrews and Likely, we don't have to have any concerns about these receivers in totality after that. So it all comes down to Bateman for the most part. But we'll see. Wade needs to make the team. Well, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. He definitely did make a case for him last game. I hope that Zay Flowers has regained his confidence. He never lost his confidence. He made 2 dumb decisions. He made that taunting play, and he fumbled the ball at the goal line. It happened. That man he accepted it. He dealt with it. It is what it is at the end of the day. Besides, he already talked about it. After they lost that championship game, Lamar came to his place for like the next few days and just talked with them. And that was all he needed. So, Zay's past that now. His confidence, it's past that now. We don't have to worry about Zay Flowers and his confidence. I guess Wade can help take the double team off from Flowers if he makes the team. You would hope so, but we got to remember this is the preseason. I like seeing these guys making plays, but this is the preseason. You can't guarantee that, just because someone's balling on the preseason does not mean it's going to translate to the game. And Wade made a great move. But, if that's the only thing he can showcase, it's going to be problematic. Not to mention, he has to do it consistently, over and over again, week to week, before teams are actually going to take him. Seriously in terms of having to really put a man on him and really focus in on him. So, I like what Wade did on that touchdown, but that doesn't guarantee everything. Demarcus Robinson did the exact same thing in the preseason. That didn't work out the way we thought it was going to. Demarcus Robinson had a great touchdown in week 1. Throughout the rest of the season, he wasn't really doing much, and then he made a great touchdown play in the playoffs against Cincinnati. So there wasn't a lot to talk about in terms of the pressure he was taking off. Or at least in terms of the emphasis defenses were putting on him. So I'm glad Wade made that play, but he has to continue to make more plays like that consistently, week to week. And I don't even know how many looks he's going to get because, again, he's not wide receiver 1. He's not going to be wide receiver 2 because they've emphasized Bateman. And he's not going to be wide receiver 3 over Nelson Aguilar. So at best, he could fight for wide receiver 4. And he's fighting with both Wallace and Kirkwood for that spot. So I don't know how much looks Wade can get if he makes the team. So that has to be taken into consideration. Offensive line problems trend yearly for the Ravens. It's been that way ever since 2020. 2019, we never had a problem with the offensive line. But, once Yanda retired and some of those pieces kind of moved off, we've had issues. So, we've done some things to try to help out. But, the two things that hurt us was Yanda retiring and Stanley suffering that injury after signing his contract. That's why the offensive line has been the way it's been. But, last year wasn't too bad. It's just those guys started to get old. Zeitler, Morgan Moses, those guys started to get old, so they had to move off of them. Now you got to bring in young blood, and these guys have to step up and play well early on. So we'll see how it works out. Yeah, Russell Wilson is a steal. He's been a stealer for a while now. Week 1 is going to be telling. Oh, it's going to be huge. It's going to be huge in terms of telling how this team is going to look. Hell, the first 5 weeks are going to be telling. If we're sitting here after 5 games and the Ravens are under 500, I think that's a huge telling for what this team is going to be. Doesn't mean they can't turn it around. But if you're 2-3 or, God forbid, 1-4 or somehow 0-5 after 5 games because you faced off against Kansas City, you faced off against Buffalo and Cincinnati and Dallas, and you lose the majority of those games, it's going to be very telling of where the Ravens are. But if you're winning a majority of those games, like you're 4-1 or 5-0, yeah, it's going to be very telling where the Ravens are. But we'll have to see. Had Buffalo defeated Kansas City, Ravens would have been Super Bowl champs. Can't make that assumption because you don't know how we would have played against the Bills. If Buffalo would have been able to beat Kansas City, there's a good chance they beat us too. We can't play the if games, man. Don't know how that matchup against Buffalo would have worked out in the AFC Championship game. And you can't assume just because we beat the Bills in this, which, by the way, we hadn't faced off against the Chiefs or the Bills last year, so we don't know how we would have fared off against that defense. And we don't know how the rematch in in the Super Bowl against San Francisco would have worked out. We can make the assumptions all day, but they're nothing more than assumptions and potential predictions. I can't base facts off of a if situation. Week 1 will determine the season. I don't think it's going to determine the season, but it definitely could stamp a mark on the season. Because if Baltimore gets beat again, the narrative will be they can't beat Kansas City. If you can't do it in the regular season, how can we expect you to do it in the postseason? But at the same time, the Bills beat the Chiefs in the regular season, but then can't beat them in the postseason. Either way, the narrative will continue that we can't beat the Chiefs if we lose to them week 1. If you beat them, it's going to be a conversation of, well, why didn't you do what you did last year? You had them in your house last year. Why didn't you do this when you had them in your team in your house last year in the AFC title game? And even if you don't look at it like that, beating them would be, very positive in terms of heading in the right direction. But again, like I said, Buffalo's beating them in the regular season and then loses them in the playoffs. Your test against Kansas City doesn't really come until January. So it is what it is. I'm sold on Ojabo. Hey, man, he looked great. Hopefully he brings that, same ferocity to the regular season and consistently make plays for us. You have to beat the Chiefs and go to the Super Bowl. No getting around. Well, yeah, you got to beat Kansas City at some point on the path to trying to go to the Super Bowl. That's just how it is. Everybody knows that. Everybody besides Linderbaum is questionable. That's fair to say. I'm concerned about the offense in week 1. The only thing on the offense I'm concerned about is the offensive line. I expect Lamar to be ready to go. I expect both Andrews and Likely to be ready to go. I expect Zay Flowers to be ready to go. The only question mark I'm going to have is for Rashad Bateman because they put so much faith in him that he has to at least show us something early on in the season. Because he's going to be tested. He's going to be tested. You're going to go up against some tough defenses. I got to see Bateman produce early on in the season. But we'll see. Please beat the Cowboys. America's Dak Prescott is on the path to losing all. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. Yeah, Ricky could be a good pick too. Two great wide receivers help our two tight ends. Exactly. So Bateman has to step up in that case. It's interesting that the Chiefs can't beat the Lions, but the Ravens decimated the Lions. I mean, how many times have they played the Lions, honestly? They lost to them last year by 1 point in a controversial situation because Tony couldn't catch a football. I don't think it's a situation where they can't beat the Lions. It's just like the time they had played them in week 1 last year, Tony literally cost them the game. Chiefs were going to win that game if Tony, I don't know, holds on to the ball. They would have been in field goal range and they would have won the game. Most likely, because Butker's literally one of the best kickers in football. So if Tony holds on to the football, they probably win week 1. So I don't think it's a situation where they can't beat them. It's just, a receiver costs you a game and you haven't had a lot of opportunities to really face off against the Lions. So I don't think, I'd put my bets on Kansas City if they matched up with, I just mean last year and yesterday. Dude, you can't count a preseason game. How do you use a preseason game as an assessment to say they can't beat a team? A preseason game? Come on, man. We lost to the Eagles week 1 of the preseason. Does that mean we can't beat the Eagles when we face off against them in December? Come on, man. You know that's a preseason game. You can't use a preseason game to assess a regular season matchup. Mahomes played 2 drives. He played against the Lions? He played 1 or 2 drives. I can't make my assessment on that based on that. It's a preseason game. Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson didn't step on that field when we faced off against the Eagles week 1, and we lost that game. Should I make the assumption we can't beat the Eagles, man? When we face off against the Eagles in December, they're going to smoke us. Nah, you can't base that off of that. And they faced off 1 time last year in terms of the Eagles and in terms of the Lions and Chiefs. It's tough for me to just make that assessment. In that game, the Chiefs literally win the game if Tony holds on to the football. So, again, if I was to look at a Chiefs-Lions matchup, especially in the playoffs, you bet on the Chiefs every time. They're the champs for a reason. They're back-to-back champs for a reason. When they need to show up, they do. What did you think of Josh Johnson with the 11? Yeah, I talked about this earlier. I think he played much better than he did in week 1. He was consistent. He was decisive with the ball. He didn't really put the ball in harm's way, and he made plays here and there. I still don't fully feel comfortable with the backup quarterback position, though. I'm glad he did have that game, but it's against the second and third stringers for the Falcons, and we have a tough schedule this year. I don't trust Josh Johnson to do anything against some of these defenses, but I'm glad to see he made some plays here and there. I still feel we might have to go get somebody else as a backup. Tell Cowboys just because this kicker made a 66-yard and somehow he's... I don't care about what Cowboys got to say. I really don't. Cowboys fans are going to say whatever they want to say. And that's great that he hit a 66-yard and they assume he's the best kicker in the NFL. I hope they sign him, and they better pray to God he doesn't miss any point in kicks. It don't matter to me what the Cowboys are saying right now. They're going to run their mouth about everything. It is what it is, though. They don't really have much to run their mouth on this year because of how the situation's going. CeeDee Lamb's still not signed. It's a whole thing. The CeeDee Lamb's not signed. I don't even think they gave Micah Parsons an extension yet. And Dak Prescott might be out of Dallas after this year if they don't give him a contract. Who knows what's going to happen with that? So it's a whole situation there. I'm not really too pressed on that. But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. Only wanted to make this relatively an hour. I didn't want to go too far into this because, again, it's the preseason and we can't fully assess what this team's going to be based on the preseason. It's just that with this case, we have a lot more to talk about because the backup quarterback position is important and they haven't been, anything spectacular. And then the offensive line, we're literally playing guys that are going to start for our offensive line week 1. Voorhees is a week 1 starter. Rosengarten is a week 1 starter. So we do have to see how that's going to go. And either Cleveland or Falele is going to be one of our starters. So this is a reason to talk about that. And then you got some other guys that are going to be supposed to be important and are going to be out there, like a Wiggins, like a Simpson, and definitely like an Ojabo. So there's reasons to speak on this. Maybe Sam Darnold can come as a... Hell no. Hell no, I don't want Sam Darnold here. Why would I want Sam Darnold? No. I'm good. I am good. I do not want Sam Darnold in Baltimore. That will do nothing for us. He doesn't fit our play style. I'm good. Like, the best you can give me that would at least make some sense is Ryan Tannehill. Because even though Ryan Tannehill doesn't fit our play style, Ryan Tannehill literally spent 4 years playing alongside Derrick Henry. That would at least make sense. If you tell Tannehill, hey, what I need you to do when you're coming out here in the center is hand the ball to Derrick Henry. That's clockwork for him. He spent 4 years handing the ball to Derrick Henry. And he's still good enough to be somewhat of a starter. But Sam Darnold, no. No. I don't want Sam Darnold here. Please do not bring Sam Darnold here. Anyway, guys, I'm going to end it here. Just wanted to give my thoughts on the second preseason game, as well as some of the ups and downs we've seen from the Ravens so far. We'll be keeping a track of how things are going to go this week because it's the week of joint practices. And whatever we're seeing from these joint practices will give us a great assessment. If the offensive line is getting beat by the pass rushers in the front seven of the Packers, that will be telling. If these receivers, other than Zay Flowers, is doing nothing against the secondary of the Green Bay Packers, that will be telling. If our front seven is not able to stop the running game against the Packers, that will be telling. And we'll have something to discuss there. But at the same time, it is joint practices. No one's going 100% of these practices, but, it is great to go up against another opponent instead of going up against the same guys you see every day that's on your team. It does get tiring. You want to go, at some point, the defense wants to go and tackle somebody else or wants to go and go at it with somebody else other than their teammates. But yeah, we'll see what happens with that. Anyway, guys, I'm going to head on out of here. Wanted to keep this an hour, and we have officially reached that mark. So, yeah, I'm going to see you guys later. We'll keep track of what happens this week with the joint practices, and we'll go from there. Season's almost here, guys. Season's almost here, so we got to get excited, got to get pumped, and got to get ready for that. With that being said, that is all I've got, guys, and I will see you later. Peace out.